Hello and welcome back to our last session today. We are now going to hear from Ruth and Cara from the Faraday Institute down in Cambridge. Faraday does a lot of the things we've been discussing individually here today. They cover all of the kind of the bases, as it were. So we just thought the last session today with them would be a good way of starting to draw those strands together and learning from their experience. So I think it's fair to say that Faraday have been doing this work for longer and more strategically and more intentionally and more joined up than many of us have yet got the experience of. So we'll be drawing on their vast experience and accumulated years of knowledge. But also I want to point out that Ruth and Cara are involved with all these other organisations as well. Right? Ruth was our first development officer here at CiS. Cara is a past Oliver Berkeley lecturer. So as people in this room will probably know, I'm fond of saying we're all on the same mission and we're cooperating rather than conspiring against each other in this work. So you may start off somewhere, you may end up somewhere else, and you may one day come back to us. Who knows? Who knows? So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ruth, who will tell us just a bit about Faraday as an introduction to it.
I will unmute myself and admit to Matt we've switched the presentation order. But leave it on this slide because it's beautiful and it represents what we do at the Faraday Institute. I think you could have no better summary of the day than a very curious person surrounded by science looking deep into the Bible. So the Faraday Institute, as you've heard, is based in Cambridge. It was set up by two senior scientists, Bob White, who we've heard this morning, and Dennis Alexander. No doubt many of you have read his books and heard his talks over the years. And the aim was to show that science and faith can fit together, particularly helping scientists to engage with science and faith. We have a Christian ethos, and we're now a team of about 20 people doing research into science and religion. Research projects at the moment include looking at the history of science and mixing that with theology, and also the philosophy of science. Someone is also looking at responses to natural disasters, and there's publications ongoing with that. So there are many, many projects, and we've been very grateful to have a large number of researchers coming through our doors and going on to other institutions over the years, and hope that will continue. We also do a lot of dissemination. You're going to hear next from our youth and schools team, who have a huge impact in this area. Alongside, we work very closely, as you've heard. We've gotten the Big Bang, and with the LASAR project in Canterbury, and numerous other projects. And we also do more general outreach, just to adults. We do public lectures, short courses, publications from very short papers for the general public through to academic books. We also work with churches, which is my own role. The aim, we always try to keep working scientists involved in what we do. That's one of our distinctives. And I think, as has been said, we have links with quite a lot of the other organizations that we work with. And although I'm called the Church Engagement Director, it is very much a team effort. Within the Faraday Institute, everyone has a Christian ethos. Most of our staff, I can't remember, I think all of our staff at the moment are Christians. And so all of us are involved in engaging with churches in all sorts of different ways. And so my role has been to look at what we do, to think about other opportunities we could create, to try and create opportunities for the team that they might not have thought of, hopefully that are welcome. And my own strategy at the moment has been to think about little and often. I think church leaders at the moment, we're all very stretched, let's face it. I've had a number of conversations this week, well, with myself and with other people. You know, we're all pretty stretched. We've all been impacted by COVID in different ways, and church ministers are one of the groups that have been especially impacted. They've been rushed off their feet. They've had to completely reinvent their jobs, and probably will continue to do so as they try and figure out where their congregation is, both spiritually and physically, and everything else. Cost of living crisis is hitting. So it's not going to change, really. So I think, thankfully, there are individuals who are able to put in that extra effort to serve the community by doing a bigger project, and eClass are very well placed to serve them. They and everyone else would be grateful to hear that, we'd like them to do something little and often and hand them resources right in front of their noses, if we can, that they can grab and use to do things that they are already doing. So I'll give you an example of something I did last week. The Faraday Institute is part of the Cambridge Theological Federation, which does what it says on the tin. It's all the theological colleges and research institutes that involve theology. In Cambridge, we get together for a service several times a term. The students, all the ordinands, have to go. So it's a great audience to reach, and it was Faraday's turn to run it, so we put together a Eucharist, and there were lots of liturgies to draw from, which was great. So I didn't have to write anything. I did a lot of cutting and pasting and asking permission to use things. I put it online. I've gathered the resources that, there are already some other things online, faraday.institute/liturgy, so we put it on the front of the program. We did the service, everyone enjoyed it. We interviewed a scientist, which was Cara, a marine, whose background is in marine biology, and then our director, Paul Ewart, who's familiar to those in Christensen science. We have another good link there. Prayed for all the, as many you will have done in your church services from time to time, for the scientists and the students and the teachers involved, and for all of creation. So we had a very simple service. There are some wonderful songs, science-themed songs. That post is coming. I have a musician who's going to help me put that post together. If you'd like to send me any song ideas, please do. So we were able to run something. They were able to experience it, be given the liturgy right on the front of the program. Here's the link. Download it. You can use it yourself. And I think that's a very fly my own flag. It was a team effort, or our own flag. It was relatively easy for us. The resources were already there. It was a matter of picking the ones that were good and appropriate. Sometimes we do have to create new things that are unique, and there are niches that have not been filled, and there will always be a need for that, but I was able to pick out what was there, put it in a format that was useful, get it in front of people's noses, and hopefully at least one or two will use it. Even if one or two use it, that will double or triple our audience of what we did. So we're all familiar, or many of us are familiar to the numbers we need in our grant report. So that's an example of what I'm doing, and I think it's time to hand over to Cara Perrett from our Youth and Schools team, who will tell them what they're doing.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Today I'm just going to briefly, 6 minutes, introduce you to the Youth and Schools team at the Faraday, a bit about what we do, why we do, and how. In a nutshell, we exist to help young people explore their big questions about science, religion, and their interactions. Oh, that worked well. Didn't like you. If you've spent any time with young people, you'll know that they have amazing questions, and they just seem to have this very natural sense of curiosity about them. So from the younger age groups, you might be getting what you think are childish questions, but are actually quite deep and deceptively hard to answer. Things like why, or how do you know that? And you're like, oh, how do I know that? Or you got the older age groups, and they're just skipping between so many different topics, from artificial intelligence to souls to the climate, and you're like, where do I start? So maybe if you look at some of these questions we receive in schools, you might be thinking, wow, how exciting. Others of you might feel your heart start to race and be like, how do I get out of here? I think you'd be excused for the latter. Children ask some very, very tough questions. But I think what's really exciting is that there's an appetite for it. And we have to, like has been said before, humbly accept their questions while also reflecting that we still struggle with some of these things too, and that's the nature of these questions. At the Faraday, we're blessed to be kind of surrounded by discussions and resources that take questions like this quite seriously. But we did find that a lot of them were happening at quite an adult level. So the Faraday has always engaged with young people to a certain degree, but in 2013, this work started to expand into what's now the Youth and Schools program, who really have a heart for, as it says, changing the nature of science-faith communications to generations of children, young people, and their educators. So can we take these rather big topics, these academic discussions, and really bring them down to a level where young people can engage with them, and not only young people, but their influences around them, like parents, teachers, and youth workers? And can we do it in a way that validates their questions and explores them, but maybe even expands their questions and their natural curiosity? So this is the joy of what we aim towards. We're now a team of 4. And we kind of approach this task through various avenues, which I will run through very quickly. We love running sessions with young people. We tailor this from ages 3 to 18, and many contexts from churches, schools, festivals. So we really do reach into any space where we're invited. Common, though, to all of these tailoring approaches will be that we focus on making them interactive, hands-on, personally engaging, and really a safe space where young people can ask any questions that they have. As you can imagine, they'll take different warming up. So you might be in a class of 11-year-olds who are jumping out of their seat to kind of ask or answer your questions. Or you might be faced with some pretty sullen 18-year-olds at the start of the day. But I think what's encouraging, and Gone Big Bang will be able to say this as well, is that throughout the day, when you're tapping into things that they're really interested in, we get really great engagement across that spectrum, because you're tapping into questions that they're really interested in talking about, if you just give them that kind of space to think about what they think as well. So to date, we've run about 800 sessions, about 30,000 young people, and like I say, the responses are really encouraging, just in terms of their general excitement and interest in the topics, but also their understanding of the nature of science, the nature of religion, and how they might interact. We also love talking to adults, so we really aim to come alongside those people who are in positions of influence. So like I said, parents, teachers, youth workers, and just help equip and support and encourage them to explore these big questions with their young people. So we do that through some training courses, some resources like lesson plans or youth camp material. And we've got a training course coming up which might be of interest to some here or some people you know, which is aimed at supporting scientists, theologians, or people in similar fields who want to improve their skills when talking to young people. And we found that such an encouraging weekend. I know some people in the room you can chat to who've been on it. You really just leave feeling very, very encouraged. So do look at our website if that's of interest to you. That's coming up in September. Finally, we also like to produce some resources that those people can use. So our websites have been newly launched. The kids' website aims at ages 2 to 11, teens age 11 to 18, and then the educators' site kind of compiles all that material as kind of a one-stop shop for adults who are looking for ideas or support in this. So each website has answers to commonly asked questions, resources and activities, things like that. On our website, you'll also find a lot of resources. The resources on there are things that we think are helpful for exploring these science-faith questions. So they're books that take the Bible seriously, books that take science seriously, and books that kind of celebrate science as a gift from God. Within that list, there'll be some that we've worked on as authors or just supporting other authors, and you might have seen them on our stand. But if you know of any resources you think are helpful, do also flag them to us, because we like to just be able to point people to things that are really helpful. And just to finish off, I think the really exciting news is that this can be really well received. So we have such encouraging interactions with young people in schools. We see some really exciting shifts, again, as you saw with God and the Big Bang's data there, in how they think and how they feel about these topics. And we're also being kind of met with very excited educators who have really been wanting this, which is really encouraging. And I'd like to encourage you that maybe a session, like a full science faith session, is something that your young people need, but it can actually be really powerful to just give them the opportunity to have a small, positive science faith interaction, which can be as simple as just doing some science in a religious building where they wouldn't expect it, and kind of challenging why they wouldn't expect it there. So, yeah, be encouraged. And get in touch if you have any questions or if you need us in any way.
Okay, thank you very much, Cara and Ruth. But we're not done with them yet. So we'll just drag a couple chairs forwards, and we'll just do a little bit of an interview time with them to try and tease out some more details. Oh, don't worry, I promise to be gentle. Now, first question maybe is like, how did each of you become involved in Faraday?
I was working for Christensen Science. I've been so for, I think, two or 3 years, half-time, and I was looking for something to fill the other half. I was in the lab and had realised it wasn't a good fit for me. Well, I didn't think it was. But anyway, our paths of life take quite a wiggly journey. It's very funny. But yeah, and Faraday was starting, and I sort of said, me too, can I? And so Dennis and Bob very kindly sort of wedged it open a space for me in Faraday, and yeah, that was the start of it.
In my setting in South Africa, we didn't really talk about science and religion at all. So kind of had my own little journey with that throughout my studies, but I was just looking online actually, and I saw a job at the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion, and the fact that both those words were in the title got me quite excited. So I just applied really, not knowing it was a field, and then I was very surprised when I got it, so I flew over.
That, as they say, is history. So in your respective areas of churches and youth, what do you think has worked particularly well that you could encourage other people to be trying as well?
Well, I think just to repeat, I really do think little and often, and putting things right in front of people's noses is the best way. I think a mixture of a mixture of thinking strategically and leaving space and flexibility for taking up opportunities, which I know is difficult when so many of us are raising funding by grants. But if we can find ways of building flexibility into grants where we have to have outputs, someone can maybe coach me on this later, then I think the more we can do that, the better. Yeah.
I find with talking to young people, and again, this will maybe be repeated from earlier in the day, but I think what's really powerful is getting people in front of them that are humble and willing enough to share their stories. I think it's a really nice opportunity for them to be able to hear from you without being threatened in any way, and just to be able to we have a really great privilege, I think, being able to go into these settings as a scientist and being able to openly proclaim that we're Christian and kind of share our story, in a way that maybe teachers don't have. So I think using that opportunity to just share your story through the science that they're interested in, and then that personal aspect of how you got into it, what challenges it's thrown up for you. I think that personal story medium is really good for children of that age, or any age really.
Yes.
And what specific event or output are you particularly most proud of, or think has had the most impact, or that you enjoyed the most?
101 Big Questions book. It's not my, sorry, I pinched yours. I just, so I was very loosely involved, sort of cheering on from the sidelines. And when it was put into my hands to review it in the end, as well as that it looks beautiful, I realized, oh, this is CPD for science and religion people, or any adult, you know, I mean, let alone the kids. Yes, give it to the kids. Grandkids, nephews, nieces, you know, whatever. But it's the best. It's 200-word answers to all the questions people ask. I mean, kids ask the same questions as adults, just a bit more bluntly. And so, what better thing than to get, you know, I don't know, Tom Wright, you know, 200 words. Who made God? What's not to like? You know, Francis Collins and people you've never heard of, and they're all brilliant thinkers.
It's a great answer, Ruth. Thank you for that.
Don't mention my stuff. I'm not setting precedent.
Okay, I think apart from that, the times when I've, especially I think coming out of lockdown, the event that's particularly I think kind of sparked the team and sparked excitement in the team has been that comms course, which we ran alongside God and the Big Bang in Cambridge. It's just such a freeing feeling when you're surrounded by Christians who are scientists who are all really passionate about being able to talk about it. And I just think there was such an air of humility, but also excitement that was really contagious. So even though it's a really long weekend, we all left feeling really energized. And then we've been able to use those speakers in our events afterwards so that they get practice and that we get to basically create this bigger pile of people with different specialities and different stories from different cultures as well. So the more we can build that bank of people who are comfortable and able to talk, the better.
Sorry, carry on.
I'm done.
I was going to add one more, but I'm sure you've got.
No, go for it. Go.
No, just the dinosaur bit.
I recommend that one as well. So just talking about those kind of resources, more the kind of books and things a bit more. I think when Faraday first got started, resources tended to be these kind of non-illustrative books that were of varying depth and ease of access. But then we had Test of Faith, we've had God in the Lab, we've now got Wonders of the Living World, we've got all the stuff coming out from the youth programme. Does that reflect how you feel the field has opened up and developed, as well as using new technologies like online accompaniments, things like that? And where do you see it going?
To be honest, I think it's always been there. I think scientists have always been drawn to visual, whether it's models or illustrations or sharing. I mean, when you think of the first microscopes and the beautiful pictures people made, I grew up with books that I later found Dallas Alexander's kids featured in, I think, that, you know, that Lion published. You know, I think they've always been there, and I think every generation it's, oh, let's make some, you know, let's make some visual resources. And it's great, you know, whether you're inspired by the ones before, intentionally or subliminally, you know, I think. And I'm really excited, you know, to see, everyone, and the part of what I try to do is to review the good stuff that's out there. So if there's nothing on the if something isn't on the Faraday website, then should be on the churches section, let me know, because I really like reviewing things, especially if you're willing to write the review yourself. Not joking.
I think from the young people world, there was definitely a lack of material. Often at the end of events, a parent or a teacher would come to us and say, so what books can we have to kind of continue this? Or can I even explore this with a 4-year-old? Is it possible? I wasn't on board the team when they started creating these great books, but I think it was definitely born out of requests and a real need to kind of go into that space. That's, I think, what drove that. And I struggle to read books without pictures, so I'm in the right place. I really like them.
I just read a My Theology book. That was basically a graphic novel. It was written by a graphic artist. It was really, really interesting way of engaging with theology. That's the quickest book I've read, apart from 2-year-old picture book in the last year as well. So, can you just talk maybe a little bit more about the practicalities of publishing these books? Because you've got a variety of publishers, a variety of formats, and I'm not sure if many of us here know how that process works. Are you approached by a publisher, or do you approach them?
Yes, I think in this world, on the whole, most of us, even the famous ones in science and religion, let's face it, there's probably only 2 or 3 people that the average person in the street may have heard of. So on the grand scheme of things, yes, on the whole, find a warm way into a publisher, to approach. I've never gone the agent route. I'm sure that works too. And it's tough work. If it's tough work for the people that we've heard of, it's just always tough work. Because it's tough for the publishers. There's not a massive amount of money in British Christian publishing. But don't let it put you off. I mean, goodness, we always need, every decade needs its fresh Christian books, and we need, we need people to start writing for the culture they know. I forgot what your question was. I'll let Cara.
I can't speak a lot to the logistics of approaching a publisher because I've come to the team at a point where they have quite good relationships with publishers. But I do know kind of the logistics of the process of making a children's book. Obviously, there'll be a lot of emphasis on illustrations. And as someone trying to write a science and religion book, we have to be very careful about every word we write and how it's framed and how someone might respond to it or take it. So a lot of effort goes into kind of communicating the science and religion in a helpful way that doesn't shut anyone out, but is also as accurate as possible. A good example is the dinosaur book, actually, because there has to be this very strong emphasis on getting the science right. So that if that book gets picked up, let's say by a parent who knows something about dinosaurs, and the first page shows a misinterpretation or something like that, then immediately they don't take your religion seriously because you're that religious person who doesn't even know what the up-to-date thinking is on X, Y, and Z. So a lot of effort actually goes on behind the scenes to make sure the science is as up-to-date as scientists would portray it. And also within that, as we all know, science isn't a body of little facts that we can go and look up. So portraying, I think, is quite important, portraying some of the uncertainty in the science and saying this is our best understanding at the moment. And sometimes then you have to have a bit of a discussion with the publisher who maybe wants to write a certain way, but based on reading the literature, it's a more realistic to show the children how much uncertainty there is. So that's quite an important process with the children's books.
Have you had much feedback to the books from both the youth and from kind of the non-youth stuff?
A lot of them came out during lockdown, so unfortunately not. We did have a recent book launch, which was really lovely now that people could meet again. And to be honest, we've been just working with PDFs for so long, you kind of get a bit detached from the joy of it after a while. But when you see a child like run up and say, "Mom, look at this," it really is exciting. So I think based on what I've heard, really good. Obviously, there will be audiences for whom it will not sit right. So I think on things like Amazon, we have a lot of 5 stars and a lot of 1 stars. And I think if you look at the comments associated with the 1 stars, they didn't quite know what they were buying. So they'll say, "Oh, why is there so much science in this book about God?" Or "Why do they find the need to bring God into this science book?" So they obviously didn't understand the vision. But I think for those who really wanted a book that took both things seriously, I think it goes some way to hitting that, which is really nice. And hopefully the others will still read it.
Yeah. And I think for certainly my most recent book, Wonders of the Living World, which is illustrated for adults, actually people often mistake it for a children's book because it looks so interesting. Not that the books without pictures aren't interesting, sorry, but we often put the effort on making books look attractive for children. But certainly people are refreshed both to see beautiful illustrations, which are, yes, a huge amount of work, but also to see something that is opening up conversation. And I think those conversations that are about, what science actually is and seeing how science actually works. You mentioned the uncertainty. I think once you get into that, people who didn't think they were sciencey start perking up, or you put an experiment in the hands going, if I'd known science was like this, there's so many brilliant science teachers in the world. We know they're constrained by curricula and what have you, and there's the occasional grumpy science teacher, but, and there's whole generations who didn't really get to study science, in school. So there are a lot of people who, for some reason or other, just haven't encountered how cool science is.
A slight change of tack away from resources, but thinking about how we might all work together, all these different organisations. When I've been at some Christian festivals, I say, you're down the southeast. You must know about Faraday. I get blank stares quite often. If I mention CiS, I get blank stares, or ECLAS, or God of the Big Bang. But we're out there doing things, but we don't seem to be penetrating the kind of wider church to the extent that we might want to. What strategies do you think we might have to enhance our to kind of like catalyze our effects, like by working together maybe more? Do you think that should be we should be looking at our different geographies, like you guys have the southeast, and maybe we'll have a slice of the northwest, or should it be by audience type, or are we just missing something, or do we just need more boots on the ground?
I will say something to begin with. I mean, it's not always a very popular message that we don't have to worry about science and faith together. So I think some of what we need to work on is creating, and I know there's so much creative talent among the groups, to merge our creative talent and think, well, how, maybe a best place to start is the thought for the days that ECLAS, probably reach one of the biggest audiences, or the work that so many groups are doing in schools, which reaches, and to think about which messages are popular, and if, there may be 3 or 4 that really work for today. I think there are probably some, and to be perfectly honest, I think just the more we spend time together in different ways, and it'll happen. I think we've been quite starved over lockdown of, online networking was so much better than nothing. And I'm really glad we can now do hybrid events and not travel to America every time we do a talk over there. But, I think we're, if anyone's coming to Cambridge, just look us up. We can do our bit.
I don't have very big strategic thoughts, apologies. But the UK is big, and we're, as a body of people, maybe who are comfortable enough to reach out in quite a public way, is maybe quite small. And so I think any effort we can do to encourage and equip one another to take our opportunities, and maybe even to make our opportunities, will be really valuable. We often, as well, because we are only a small team, we generally go where we're invited. So that's how we get into places. And so generally, if you've got a teacher or a church leader who's passionate about this, they'll bring you in. And then they like it, so you go back the next year. And then our calendar gets quite full from the people who believe in this already, which is a great opportunity because the young people get to hear it. But if there's a school where no one thinks this is of any importance, then perhaps we're missing them because we're busy, they're not looking out for us, and we're not able to reach out to them. I don't have a solution, but maybe that's a little bit of the problem.
Something we can maybe continue these conversations beyond today with, to try and tackle ourselves together. Thinking just of church leaders, just in the last few minutes, how do we move them especially from, because we saw the figures earlier where they don't view science and religion as in conflict. How do we move them from just kind of shrugging their shoulders and going, yes, it's not in conflict? How do we move them to kind of be enticed to engage actively with science and to talk about science and to preach about science and teach about it in churches?
I think we need to help them see how high up the priority order it is. And I think if we give them the space to explore that, they'll probably quite quickly realise that science impacts all of our lives, kind of all the time. And it is often space and time, I think, and relationships and accessibility to resources. So there's a number of factors that we can bring together for them, I think. I think in a sense it's a little bit like Emma's apologetics talk. You know, if you go through those steps, you know, it's about persuading someone and helping them to see they have to do another thing. Sorry, I'm just subverting what you said. It really was about evangelism and not about anything else, but you could apply similar principles of helping people to, light bulb. Oh, what shall I do? Oh, there's a thing, you know.
Yeah, and in some ways we need to be a little bit evangelistic for science as well. So just a final. Oh, sorry.
Just a small thought. So we run some training courses for youth workers, and the main aim of that, we haven't done many, I think we've done one. The main aim of that was to get them confident and excited enough to run things for themselves, and we gave them some guidance on that. And there was a general, by the end of the session, a real excitement for it, but still a, will you come and do it for us? Which I completely understand. But maybe there's that step, which is just a confidence step, in that they think it's important, but they'd rather not do it themselves. And so how do we properly equip them, not just get them excited, but actually give them the confidence to think that they can run it themselves? Because, we as a youth and schools team do this a lot, and I still get nervous, so that must be quite scary for them going into this territory with, say, 18-year-olds, and they don't know what they're going to ask or what problems they're going to face. So it's about making them confident, I think, as well.
Just a final question, brief answers. What would you like to do next?
To be honest, I'm going to go and watch a movie and wind down. And I genuinely think it's something we need to invest in. It's, you know, I wrote a chapter on creativity in my book, God in the Lab, and creating space for creativity to emerge, I think fun and time off is just something we need quite a lot at the moment, and hanging out together.
I think one of the things we want to do a bit more of coming out of the pandemic, and I wish we'd kind of got to it sooner, but we didn't, is making some high quality video clips that maybe if a teacher isn't confident to do the content themselves, maybe they can have a video from us that sparks the discussion and then they run with it for the rest of the session. But just some kind of short, good quality videos which maybe talk to scientists who are Christian that are aimed at young people and helping their influencers start these conversations with them. That's what we'd like to do a bit more of next.
Thank you very much, Cara and Ruth. So I'm just gone 4:30, so I will draw this session to a close. Just thinking Faraday's example of how they've operated over the years as the kind of culture around them has changed, as the church culture has as well, and attitudes to science and faith. As the Theos report a couple of weeks ago showed very strongly, what we're doing now is very different to maybe what we were doing 15 years ago. I think the example of Faraday progressing and growing and expanding all throughout that is something we can all look up to. So thank you again. I will just hand over now to Paul, who will give us a few closing remarks for the day.
Thank you, Gavin. Well, this is the time of the day when we start to think about drawing things to a close. And of course, one of the important things I must do is to say thank you. A very big thank you to Bob, who gave us our first talk this morning, and it was great to have him with us. I want to thank obviously the people who made this meeting possible, in particular Bill Clegg, who led the local group. And of course Gavin, who was instrumental in putting things together, and of course our wonderful Emeritus Development Officer, Steph Bevan, who's now migrated to God in the Big Bang. We're very grateful to that great team for laying this conference on for us. And of course to the staff at St. John's, who have made us feel so welcome and provided for us. And also thank you to everyone who's been watching us on Zoom today. It's been great to have you with us, and we hope that we have found it helpful and that you felt part of the meeting as we've been bouncing ideas off each other. It's been great really to hear what each other are doing from the different organizations, and including the faith experiment that we met today at the exhibition, just one of many other organizations who are involved in the science and faith interaction in our country. So we heard from ECLAS, of course, God in the Big Bang, UCCF, and finally at Faraday. And Christensen Science has just been a privilege to be hosting this meeting and to bringing us together. And we hope to continue to do that because we didn't get a chance really to tell you much about the Christensen Science resources. But simply let me say that our main resource, apart from the literature and booklets that we provide and support for students and local groups, our main resource is our people. And that we have people really dotted all around the countryside. And that is an enormous untapped resource for each of the organizations here. And so one of the things that we might think about as we look to the future is how to take advantage of our Christensen Science members, many of them active scientists, embedded in local communities as well as in their churches, and to equip them and to encourage them to be more involved. And that's a call to all our members out there, nearly 700 of us. Okay, there's a great resource there that we could be using. So let's think about how best to use the resources that we have. I know that I've learned a lot today from what I've heard from what others are doing. That's been enormously encouraging for me. One of the things that's really encouraged me mostly was the enthusiasm that so many young people, and especially young females, are involved in this science interaction. There's a real shift in the demography here in this interaction, so that's been great. I suppose one of the things I want to say thanks you for is that we're all actually here together and talking. Of course, we've been shouting or calling to each other over the last few years during the pandemic, but it's as we look to the future and getting out of the pandemic, let's seize the opportunity. Let's take this as a starting point to continue the conversation and to develop. We've been listening and learning and perhaps thinking of ideas how we can lend a hand to one another as we decide how best to work together. So I want to invite us all to continue thinking. It would be perhaps overly ambitious to suppose that just in one day we'd come up with a brilliant idea that's going to solve all our problems. That was never going to happen. But I think we can continue. I think we've laid out some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we have to work together. And so let's continue to think creatively about how we can continue this conversation by keeping in touch, perhaps building in a regular meeting, something like this, even with just a few representatives from each of the organizations, just get our heads together, bringing ideas from our membership in and pulling them together. Perhaps setting up some kind of federation of science and religion organizations that will bring us together on a regular basis. Because one of the things that's come up more and more during the days we've listened to one another is the question of profile. That many of us just didn't know the other ones existed, even within our own sphere of science and religion. How much more difficult it's been for the public out there with whom we aim to engage to know that we're there. How do we raise our profile? One of the ways that we can do that, of course, is to make use of all the people who are out there who are involved in science and religion, Christians who are working in science in various ways, to encourage them to form part of a local group, team up with one of the organizations, get involved in helping them, using their expertise. Of course, funding is also an issue that faces all of us. And it's one thing, too, that we can perhaps work on together. Funding agencies do really like to fund joint proposals and to encourage people to work together. So if we can indeed find ways in which we can have constructive engagement with each other to reach out to the public, then funders will look very favourably on that kind of thing. It will increase the impact that we can have. So make joint approaches to funders to enable projects to help us work together is something we can think about. But also, of course, we don't want to be dependent on grants and funding agencies, wonderful though they are. We need to think longer term about sustainability of all the organisations and the operations that we're involved in. And that involves, I think, getting the wider church involved in supporting us, not just in prayer, but with real cash. And let's be blunt about it, we need that. Some of the work does need resourcing. And so it'll be important that we do encourage churches to see us, all of us, as partners in mission. So I hope we'll go away from today remembering that we have listened, learned, and perhaps learn how to lend a hand together as we engage with the public in this wonderful challenge of sharing our enthusiasm for science and our love of Christ. Let's pray. God our Father, we just thank you for the joy it's been to be together today and with our colleagues and friends online. We pray that you'll continue to guide us in our judgments, in our thinking together, and that you will lead us by your Spirit in the way that we can work together and bring honor and glory to your name. Be with us now, Father, as we disperse, but continue with us and guide us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. A word from Bill.
It's just that I think there's one word of thanks that's been missed out by Paul. And I don't mean Paul. I mean, it's traditional to thank the person who's thanked everybody else, and we do. But I mean Matt. Matt Collins has looked after all our technology today. And I think probably the reason why Paul overlooked him most is because Matt has been inconspicuous. And that's a measure of real success in somebody who runs technology, is that you don't notice them. So thanks a lot, Matt, for that. And I have a signal from over here, from Steph, to say, please do not forget your feedback survey. And please don't leave any stuff behind. Thank you.